The smell of gun oil and diesel fuel filled the English countryside as thousands of American soldiers prepared for something big. Nobody knew exactly when or where, but everyone knew it was coming. The invasion of France. The moment they had trained for. The moment that would change everything. Corporal Jimmy Hayes sat alone in the corner of a supply tent, his hands busy with wire and canvas. Around him, metal clips and springs lay scattered on a wooden crate. His fingers moved with practiced skill, twisting and shaping pieces that other soldiers had thrown away as junk. The tent was supposed to be for resting, but Hayes never could sit still when his mind was working on a problem point 3 days before what would later be called D-Day. Hayes had noticed something during training exercises. The ammunition feed system in their Sherman tank kept jamming. It happened when they fired too fast, when dust got in the mechanism, when the crew was tired and made small mistakes. Each jam meant precious seconds lost. In combat, those seconds could mean death. Hayes had grown up in Detroit, in his father's machine shop. While other boys played baseball, young Jimmy had learned how metal moved, how springs compressed, how simple designs often worked better than complicated ones. His father used to say that the best tool was the one that never broke when you needed it most. That lesson had stayed with Hayes through basic training, across the Atlantic Ocean, and into the fields of southern England. The flap of the tent opened, and Sergeant Morrison walked in with 2 other crew members from their tank. Morrison was a big man from Texas with a loud voice and strong opinions about everything. He saw Hayes working and laughed. Well, look at our little inventor," Morrison said, loud enough for everyone in the tent to hear. "What are you making now, Hayes?" "A new weapon to win the war." Hayes did not look up. "Just working on something for the ammunition loading, Sergeant." Morrison walked closer and picked up part of the canvas belt Hayes had been sewing. He held it up like it was a dead rat. This is what you have been wasting time on? It looks like something a kid made in our class." The other men laughed. Private Wilson, their driver, shook his head. "Jimmy, we have trained with standard equipment for months. You think some homemade junk is going to work better than what the Army gives us?" "The standard system jams," Hayes said quietly. "I have counted. It jams at least once every 15 rounds when we fire fast. This design would keep shells moving smooth, even under heavy use." Morrison threw the canvas piece back onto the crate. "Listen here, Hayes. In 3 days, we're going to hit that beach in France. German bullets are going to be flying everywhere. The last thing I need is my crew worrying about some junkyard experiment. You focus on following orders and doing your job. Leave the engineering to the people who went to college for it." Hayes felt his face get hot, but he said nothing. Morrison was the tank commander. What he said was final. The sergeant walked toward the tent exit, then turned back. "That is an order, Corporal. Pack up that trash and get some rest. We move out at 0400 tomorrow for final exercises." After they left, Hayes sat alone again. He looked at the belt he had been working on for 3 weeks. Maybe Morrison was right. Maybe it was stupid to think a corporal from Detroit could improve on Army equipment. But Hayes remembered the jams. He remembered how Private Rodriguez, their loader, had to fight with stuck shells while enemy targets were still shooting at them during exercises. Hayes made a decision. He finished the belt that night, working by flashlight long after the other men were asleep. He made it adjustable, with strong stitching his mother had taught him. He made the clips smooth so shells would slide through without catching. He tested each spring until they felt perfect. When he was done, the belt looked simple. Maybe that was good. Simple things did not break. That he folded the belt carefully and put it at the bottom of his pack. He would not tell anyone about it, but he would keep it, just in case. The next morning, Hayes and his crew went through final preparations for their Sherman tank. Their tank was named Iron Betty, painted on the side by Wilson, who missed his girlfriend back home. The Sherman was a good tank, but everyone knew the German Panzers had thicker armor and bigger guns. American tanks won by having more numbers, better supply lines, and crews who worked together well. Lieutenant Cole, the platoon leader, gave them the briefing everyone had been waiting for. June 5th was the day. They would cross the English Channel and land on a beach in Normandy, France. Their job was to push inland fast, support the infantry, and break through German defenses before the enemy could bring reinforcements. That night, Hayes wrote a letter to his parents. He told them about England, about his crew, about Iron Betty. He did not tell them he was scared. He did not tell them about the belt hidden in his pack. Instead, he wrote about coming home, about working in the machine shop again, about the future. When he finished writing, he folded the letter but did not send it. He put it in his shirt pocket, close to his heart. His mother always said unsent letters brought good luck. Around him, thousands of soldiers prepared for the same journey. Some prayed. Some joked to hide their fear. Some, like Hayes, worked with their hands to keep their minds busy. None of them knew exactly what waited across that channel, but they all knew their lives were about to change forever. Hayes checked his gear one final time before trying to sleep. At the bottom of his pack, the homemade ammunition belt waited quietly. Just a simple piece of canvas and metal. Just junkyard trash. But Hayes had built it to save lives. Soon, he would find out if he was right. The English Channel looked gray and angry as thousands of ships moved through the water toward France. Hayes stood in the cramped interior of Iron Betty, feeling the landing craft rock beneath them. Around him, his crew stayed silent. Each man dealt with fear in his own way. Wilson gripped the driver controls. Thompson, their gunner, kept checking and rechecking his equipment. Rodriguez whispered prayers in Spanish. Above them, Sergeant Morrison sat in the tank commander position. Through the radio, they could hear scattered reports. The first wave had hit the beaches. The reports were not good. Heavy resistance. Many casualties. German defenses stronger than expected. The landing craft lurched as waves hit its side. Hayes felt his stomach turn. He had never been good with boats. Growing up in Detroit, the biggest water he had seen was Lake Michigan. Now he was crossing an ocean to fight people who wanted to kill him. Iron Betty crew, listen up. Morrison's voice came through their headsets. When that ramp drops, Wilson drives us straight into the water. Do not stop. Do not slow down. We have been through this in training. Keep moving no matter what you see. Hayes knew what Morrison meant by that. They would see bodies. Burning vehículos. Men who had landed before them and did not make it off the beach. The army had warned them. The first waves always took the worst losses. The landing craft engine changed pitch. They were getting close. Hayes could hear explosions now, even through the metal walls of their tank. Big ones. Artillery. Maybe naval guns firing at German positions. Maybe German guns firing at American ships. In war, explosions all sounded the same. The ramp dropped. Morning light flooded in, along with the sound of chaos. Machine gun fire crackled across the beach. Men shouted. Shells exploded in the water and on the sand. Wilson gunned the engine, and Iron Betty rolled forward into the shallow water. The water came up to their tracks, then slowly got lower as they climbed toward the beach. Hayes saw things through his periscope that he would never forget. Bodies floating in the surf. Destruya vehículos burning. Wounded men crawling toward cover. This was Omaha Beach, though nobody would call it that for a few more hours. Right now it was just hell. Moving inland. Wilson shouted. Impact left side. Something hit their armor. Not hard enough to penetrate, but enough to make the whole tank ring like a bell. Thompson fired the main gun at a German bunker on the hill. The 75mm shell hit concrete and exploded. Secondary explosions followed. Ammunition cooking off inside the bunker. They pushed forward. Other Shermans from their company moved up the beach beside them. One took a direct hit from an anti-tank gun and stopped moving. Hayes watched crew members bail out, running for cover. 2 made it. 2 did not. Morrison directed them toward a break in the seawall. Engineers had blown a gap for tanks to move through. German mortar fire rained down around them. Shrapnel pinged off their armor. They made it through the gap and started climbing the hill toward the village of Vierville-sur-Mer. Then Morrison screamed. Hayes turned and saw blood. Shrapnel had come through the open commander hatch. Morrison clutched his shoulder, blood running between his fingers. The radio crackled with urgent calls for medics, for ammunition, for reinforcements. I am hit, Morrison gasped. Hayes, you have the tank. Get us to the rally point. Before Hayes could respond, Morrison had climbed out of the commander position, dropping to the ground outside. Medics were already running toward him. Hayes stared at the empty seat above him. He had been a corporal for 2 years. He had never commanded a tank in actual combat. Now, with bullets flying and explosions shaking the ground, he was in charge. "Hayes!" Wilson shouted. "What do we do?" Hayes climbed into the commander position. The view was better here, but more dangerous. He could see the whole battlefield. American forces were pushing inland, but slowly. Too slowly. German resistance was heavy. He could see Lieutenant Cole's tank about 100 yards ahead, firing at enemy positions. "Follow Lieutenant Cole," Hayes said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thompson, target any machine gun nest you see. Rodriguez, keep shells ready. We keep moving forward." They fought their way off the beach over the next hour. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's supposedly impenetrable defense, was breaking. But it was breaking slowly, paid for in American blood. Hayes learned fast. He learned how to spot enemy positions. He learned when to use high explosive shells versus armor-piercing. He learned that staying still meant dying. WWII afternoon. They had pushed 2 miles inland. The crew stopped near a destroyed farmhouse to check equipment and catch their breath. That was when Hayes noticed the problem. The ammunition feed mechanism had jammed twice during combat. Rodriguez was exhausted from fighting with stuck shells while under fire. "The loader is not working right," Rodriguez said, his hands shaking. "I nearly cannot get that last shell cleared. If the Germans had pushed us then," he did not finish the sentence. They all knew what would have happened. Hayes looked at the standard feed mechanism. Dirt and cordite residue had gummed up the works. He thought about the belt in his pack. Morrison was gone. Hayes was commander now. He could make his own decisions. But what if it did not work? What if his homemade design failed and got his crew killed? Hayes looked at Rodriguez's tired face, at the blood still staining the commander's seat from Morrison's wound, at the burning vehicles dotting the landscape behind them. They had survived the beach. But Normandy was not over. This was just the beginning. The radio crackled. Lieutenant Cole's voice. "All tanks, prepare to move out. We push for Formigny tomorrow. Intelligence says light resistance. We're going to secure a crossroads and hold it for supply columns." Hayes acknowledged the order. Around him, his crew rested. None of them knew what was coming. None of them knew that light resistance was wrong. None of them knew that Hayes would soon have to make a choice that would save all their lives. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, they had survived D-Day. For now, that was enough. 2 days after the beach landing, Iron Betty rolled through the French countryside with 3 other Sherman tanks. The hedgerows of Normandy rose high on both sides of the narrow roads, thick walls of earth and ancient roots that turned every field into a fortress. Hayes had learned to hate these hedgerows. The Germans used them perfectly, hiding in one field until American forces passed, then attacking from behind. Lieutenant Cole led the small column in his own Sherman. Behind him came Iron Betty, then 2 more tanks commanded by sergeants Hayes barely knew. Their mission sounded simple: secure a crossroads near the town of Formigny. Intelligence said German forces in the area were light. Scattered infantry, maybe 1 or 2 armored cars. Nothing a platoon of Shermans could not handle. Hayes did not trust intelligence anymore. Intelligence had said Omaha Beach would be lightly defended too. He had seen how that turned out. Through his periscope, he watched the hedgerows carefully, looking for any sign of movement. His crew was tense. They had all learned the same lesson. In Normandy, every corner could hide death. Crossroads ahead, 200 yards. Cole's voice came through the radio. "Iron Betty, you take the left flank. Baker and Charlie secure the right. We set up a defensive perimeter and wait for the supply column. Should be here in 3 hours. Should be." Hayes repeated the words in his mind. War was full of shoulds that never happened. They reached the crossroads and deployed. The intersection was surrounded by fields, with a destroyed stone farmhouse on one corner. Perfect place for an ambush. Too perfect. "I do not like this," Wilson muttered from the driver's seat. Too quiet. He was right. The countryside was silent except for distant artillery fire. No birds. No wind in the trees. Just waiting. Hayes positioned Iron Betty behind the farmhouse ruins. Hull down, so only their turret was exposed. Good defensive position. Limited visibility. Then the world exploded. Anti-tank shells came from 3 directions at once. The tank to their right, Baker, took a direct hit to the side armor. Penetration. The Sherman brewed up, flames shooting from its hatches. The crew never had a chance. Charlie tank took a hit that disabled its tracks. The commander started backing his crew out of the turret. Panzer IV, 11 o'clock. Thompson shouted. Hayes saw it, emerging from behind a hedgerow. He had studied German tank silhouettes until he could draw them in his sleep. That low profile, the long gun. Panzer IV with the 75mm gun that could punch through Sherman armor at this range. Fire, Hayes ordered. Thompson's shot went wide as their tank rocked from a near miss. Dirt and shrapnel sprayed across their armor. More German guns opened up. Not light resistance. This was a planned ambush. Multiple tanks, anti-tank guns dug in, probably infantry moving to surround them. Cole's voice came through, strained. All units, we are pulling back to secondary position. Iron Betty, cover his transmission cut off. Hayes saw Cole's tank take a hit to the turret that jammed the traverse mechanism. The turret was stuck, unable to turn, dead in the water. German infantry started appearing in the hedgerows. This was bad. This was worse than the beach. Wilson, get us to Cole's tank. We need to give him cover. Hayes made the decision instantly. They could not leave their lieutenant to die. Not after surviving D-Day together. Iron Betty rumbled forward, positioning between Cole's damaged tank and the German positions. Hayes's mind raced through tactics his instructors had taught him. Use smoke for concealment. Coordinate fire with infantry support. Call for artillery. But there was no smoke left in their launchers. No infantry nearby. No artillery in range. Just Iron Betty and a broken tank against what was clearly a reinforced German position. The radio crackled again. Cole this time. Hayes, you need to hold this position. Our turret is jammed, but we can still use the radio. Supply column is turning back. Reinforcements coming, but they are 90 minutes out. You have to hold. 90 minutes. Hayes felt his stomach drop. They had maybe 20 shells ready in the storage. Thompson could fire fast, but not for 90 minutes. Not with the standard loading system that kept jamming. Rodriguez was already struggling. The loader had stuck twice in the last 5 minutes. Each jam took precious seconds to clear while German guns pounded their position. Another Panzer IV appeared, then a Marder tank destroyer with its high-velocity gun. Hayes counted enemy armor. At least 4 tanks, 3 anti-tank guns he could see, probably more hidden, plus infantry with Panzerfaust rockets moving through the hedgerows. Mathematics of death. Iron Betty could not win this fight with standard equipment. Incoming. Rodriguez screamed. A shell hit their front armor, deflecting off at an angle. Lucky hit, lucky angle. Next one might penetrate. They fired back, destroyed a half-track full of German infantry. But more kept coming. The Germans knew they had Americans trapped. They were moving in for the kill. The ammunition feed jammed again. Rodriguez cursed, fighting to clear it. Thompson had a perfect shot on a Panzer IV, but no shell in the chamber. Precious seconds ticking away. German gunners took their time, aiming carefully. The next shot might be the last thing Hayes ever saw. His hand moved to his pack. The homemade belt was there, still wrapped in canvas. Morrison had called it junkyard trash. Maybe he was right. Maybe it would fail and they would all die. But doing nothing was certain death. Hayes made his choice. Rodriguez. Hayes shouted. Emergency reload procedure. Switching to backup system. What backup system? Rodriguez looked confused, still fighting with the jammed mechanism. Hayes pulled out the belt. In a chaos of combat, covered in dirt and oil from his pack, it looked even worse than before. Rodriguez stared at it like Hayes had lost his mind. Trust me, Hayes said. Install it now. I will talk you through it. Outside, German tanks moved closer. Inside Iron Betty, with shells exploding around them and death closing in from all sides, Hayes was about to bet 4 lives on a design he had built in a tent 3 days ago. His hands did not shake as he helped Rodriguez install the belt. There was no time for doubt anymore. Only action. The belt clicked into place. Hayes said a silent prayer his father had taught him. Then they went to war. The first shell loaded through the homemade belt like butter through a hot knife. Rodriguez's eyes went wide. The smooth metal clips guided the 75 mm round perfectly into position. No catching, no yamming, just smooth mechanical motion exactly as Hayes had designed it. Target Panzer IV, 10 o'clock. Hayes called out. Thompson fired. The German tank exploded, its ammunition cooking off in a fireball that lit up the afternoon sky. Rodriguez already had the next shell ready. The belt held it at perfect angle. His hands moved in smooth rhythm. Load and clear, load and clear. The weeks of practice Hayes had put into the design were paying off. Thompson, track left, half-track approaching. Fire. Load. Fire. The half-track disintegrated. German infantry scattered from its burning wreck. Rodriguez worked like a machine, feeding shells through the belt system twice as fast as the standard loader. The canvas and wire contraption that Morrison had mocked was saving their lives. A Panzer IV shell hit their turret armor, deflecting upward. The impact made Hayes's ears ring, but Iron Betty kept fighting. Another German tank appeared from behind a hedgerow. Thompson trained the gun on it. Rodriguez had the next shell ready before Thompson even finished his previous shot. Fire. Direct hit. The Panzer brewed up, thick black smoke pouring from its hatches. German crews were good, but they were not expecting this rate of fire from a single Sherman. American tanks usually had to fire and reposition, fire and reposition. Iron Betty was standing still and throwing shells like a factory assembly line. Hayes, what did you do? Cole's voice came through the radio, amazement clear even through the static. I have never seen sustained fire like this. Hayes did not answer. He was too busy calling targets. A Marder tank destroyer was lining up a shot. Those high-velocity guns could punch through Sherman armor like paper. Thompson put a shell into its tracks, immobilizing it. Next shot took out its gun. Rodriguez kept loading, the homemade belt working flawlessly even as cordite smoke filled the tank and made breathing difficult. German mortar fire started raining down. They were frustrated now, throwing everything they had at the American position. Explosions walked across the field, each one trying to find Iron Betty. One hit close enough to shower them with dirt and rocks. Wilson, their driver, held position perfectly, keeping the tank's strongest armor facing the enemy. Panzerfaust team, 2 o'clock, 100 yards. Hayes spotted German infantry moving through a hedgerow with anti-tank rockets. Those were deadly at close range. Thompson, high explosive, loaded. Rodriguez already had the He shell in his hands, swapping ammunition types without hesitation. The belt system handled different shell types just as smoothly as armor-piercing rounds. Thompson fired. The high explosive shell airburst over the German infantry position. The Panzerfaust team disappeared in the blast. Time became strange in combat. Hayes's instructors had warned him about this. Minutes felt like hours. Actions that took seconds seemed to stretch forever. But the clock was their enemy. They needed to hold for 90 minutes. 90 minutes of continuous combat against a superior force. 90 minutes of shells, fire, and death. Iron Betty kept firing. Rodriguez's arms were burning with fatigue, but the belt made his job easier. He did not have to fight with stuck shells or wrestle with jammed mechanisms. The simple design Hayes had created did one job and did it perfectly. Load shells fast and smooth. Everything else was stripped away, just like his father had taught him. The best tool never breaks when you need it. Another Panzer IV tried to flank them. Thompson caught it moving between hedgerows and put 2 shells into its side armor. German tanks had better guns and better armor, but Sherman crews were trained to shoot faster. With Hayes's belt system, they were shooting twice as fast as normal. That made all the difference. German artillery started falling. Big shells, probably 105mm guns positioned miles away. They were calling in the heavy fire now. Explosions cratered the field around them. One hit close enough to lift Iron Betty's back and off the ground. The tank crashed down hard. Wilson checked his instruments. Engine good. Track's good. We are still in the fight. They had to be. German infantry was trying to work around their flanks. Hayes spotted them moving through the fields, using the hedgerows as cover. Cole's tank, with its jammed turret, was vulnerable from the sides. Iron Betty had to protect both their flanks and their front. Wilson, pivot 20 degrees left. Thompson, machine gun, infantry in the hedgerow. Hayes was fighting on instinct now, years of training taking over. The coaxial machine gun chattered, raking the German position. Then back to the main gun, another anti-tank gun that had revealed its position by firing. Rodriguez kept feeding shells. The belt kept working. 30 minutes had passed. Felt like days. Hayes's crew was exhausted, but they could not stop. German forces were not retreating. This crossroads mattered to them. They were willing to lose tanks and men to take it. But Hayes was willing to do anything to hold it. His crew, his lieutenant, his promise to his father to come home alive. All of it depended on holding this position that a shell hit their front armor dead center. The impact was tremendous. Hayes felt his teeth rattle. But the armor held. Sherman tanks were tough if you kept the strong side facing the enemy. Wilson adjusted positions slightly, keeping them angled right. Thompson found the gun that had fired and returned the favor. One more German tank burning. 45 minutes. Halfway, the pile of empty shell casings inside Iron Betty was growing. Rodriguez was using shells faster than Hayes had thought possible. But the belt never jammed. Not once. Even covered in gun oil and residue. Even with the tank rocking from explosions, the simple canvas and metal design kept working. All units, this is Baker 6, a new voice on the radio. The reinforcements. We have your position. Coming in from the south. Hold on, Iron Betty. Hold on, Lieutenant Cole. Cavalry is coming. Hayes felt hope surge through his exhausted body. Thompson fired again, taking out a half-track that was trying to retreat. German forces were starting to pull back. They could hear the American reinforcements now. More Sherman tanks, lots of them. Plus infanterie. The Germans knew they were about to be overwhelmed. But the fight was not over yet. The sun was setting over the Normandy hedgerows when the last German vehicle retreated from the crossroads. Iron Betty had held. For hours of continuous combat. 4 hours that military historians would later call one of the most remarkable defensive stands by a single tank in the entire Normandy campaign. Hayes sat in the commander position, his body shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Around them, the battlefield was covered in destroyed vehicles. 2 Panzer IVs burning. 3 half-tracks torn apart. Multiple anti-tank gun positions silenced. The smell of cordite and burning metal filled the air. It was the smell of survival. Lieutenant Cole climbed out of his damaged tank and walked over to Iron Betty. His face was covered in soot and his eyes were red from smoke, but he was grinning. Behind him, American reinforcements were rolling into the crossroads. Infantry spread out to secure the area. Medics ran toward wounded soldiers. Hayes, get your crew out here, Cole said. I need to see something. Hayes and his crew climbed down from Iron Betty. Their legs were weak. Rodriguez could barely stand. Thompson had to help Wilson out of the driver hatch. They had been buttoned up inside the tank for 4 hours straight, breathing smoke and cordite fumes, living with the constant thunder of their own gun firing. Cole climbed up on Iron Betty and looked inside. Other officers gathered around, including a Major Hayes did not recognize. Cole emerged a minute later, holding the homemade ammunition belt. It was blackened with powder residue, the canvas scorched in places, but still intact. Still functional. Corporal Hayes, Cole said, his voice formal now. Is this your design? Hayes nodded, suddenly nervous. Had he broken some regulation? Used unauthorized equipment? Yes, sir. Built it in England before the invasion. The standard feed system kept jamming, so I thought, this belt, Cole interrupted, just help you fire more rounds in sustained combat than any Sherman tank I have ever seen or heard of. Your crew maintained a rate of fire that held off a reinforced German position for 4 hours. Do you understand what that means? Hayes did not know what to say. Around them, other tankers were gathering, looking at the belt, looking at Iron Betty, looking at the destroyed German vehicles scattered across the battlefield. Word was spreading fast through the ranks. One Sherman had done this. One crew. One homemade piece of equipment. The major stepped forward. He was division engineering officer, responsible for all equipment modifications. He took the belt from Cole and examined it carefully, running his fingers over the clips and springs. Simple design, the major said. Strong stitching, adjustable for different crew sizes. These clips are smooth, no sharp edges to catch on shells. And this spring tension. He tested it. Perfect. Not too tight, not too loose. Corporal, where did you learn mechanical engineering? My father's machine shop, sir. In Detroit. He taught me that simple tools work best because they do not break when you need them. The major nodded slowly. Your father is a wise man. Corporal Hayes, I am putting in a commendation for you and your crew. But more than that, I am taking this belt to division engineers tonight. We're going to replicate this design and get it to every Sherman tank in Normandy. Hayes felt dizzy. He had built the belt just to help his own crew survive. He never thought about it being used by other tanks, other soldiers he would never meet. The idea that something he had made in a supply tent might save other lives made his throat tight with emotion. One more thing, Cole said. He pulled out a small box. Inside was a Bronze Star medal. This was supposed to be a simple supply escort mission. Instead, you held a strategic crossroads against impossible odds using nothing but skill, courage, and innovation. Corporal James Hayes, it is my honor to award you the Bronze Star for valor in combat. Hayes stood at attention while Cole pinned the medal to his uniform. The other soldiers applauded. Rodriguez hugged him, not caring about military protocol. Even Wilson, who rarely showed emotion, had tears in his eyes. Thompson just kept saying, "We did it," over and over like he could not believe they had survived. That night, division engineers worked to replicate Hayes' design. They took careful measurements, photographed every detail, tested the belt under different conditions. By morning, they had created technical drawings. Within a week, modified versions of the belt were being manufactured in England and shipped to France. Within 2 weeks, Sherman crews across the entire European theater were using improved ammunition systems based on Hayes' simple design. Letters started arriving for Hayes. Tank commanders he had never met wrote to thank him. One letter came from a crew that had survived an ambush in Belgium because their loader could feed shells fast enough to fight off 3 German tanks. Another came from a sergeant whose tank had held a bridge for 6 hours using the improved system. Each letter reminded Hayes why he had built the belt in the first place. To save lives. To help his brothers in arms come home. 3 weeks after the Crossroads battle, Sergeant Morrison returned from the hospital. His shoulder was bandaged, but healing. He found Hayes training new crews on ammunition management techniques. Morrison watched for a few minutes, then walked up and extended his hand. "I was wrong," Morrison said simply. "I called your word junkyard trash. I mocked you when I should have listened. You have got more common sense in your little finger than I have got in my whole head. I am sorry, Hayes. You saved a lot of lives with that belt. Maybe mine too, if I had been there." Hayes shook his hand. "You taught me to be a good tanker, Sergeant. I just added one small piece to what you already taught." The war continued. Iron Betty fought through France, into Belgium, and eventually into Germany itself. The tank took more hits, lost more paint, collected more scars. But it survived. So did its crew. All 4 men who had fought at the Formigny Crossroads made it home. When the war ended in 1945, that years later, Iron Betty was placed in a military museum in Washington, D.C. Next to the tank, in a glass case, was Hayes' original ammunition belt, blackened and worn, but preserved forever. The plaque read, "Innovation born of necessity. Created by Corporal James Hayes, June 1944. Used in the defense of Formigny Crossroads, where one Sherman held against impossible odds." This simple design improved ammunition systems across the entire U.S. tank fleet and saved countless lives. Hayes returned to Detroit after the war and opened his own machine shop, just like his father. On the wall behind his desk, he kept 3 things. A photo of his crew standing beside Iron Betty, all of them alive and smiling. A replica of the ammunition belt, and a letter from a tank commander he had never met that ended with 5 simple words. "Your belt saved my life." Sometimes the best weapon is not the biggest gun or the thickest armor. Sometimes it is just a simple tool built with care by someone who understands that every second counts when lives are on the line. Hayes had learned that lesson in his father's shop. He had proven it on a battlefield in France. and he never forgot it for the rest of his long life.